So we've kind of finished the first step of editing a video. We've imported content into an event inside of Final Cut Pro 10. And that event is just this overtime event that we created earlier. We can see that that event is stored in this overtime library. And depending on what's selected, we'll see on the right side the content of that selection. So right now the overtime event is selected. So everything we're seeing here on the right side is part of that overtime event. If I had multiple events, I could actually click on the overtime library and I would see those as well over here. In this case, we only have one event, so it doesn't really matter if the library or the event is selected. It'll still show us the same things on the right side. This left column is called the library sidebar. And it is very helpful to see the library sidebar when you want to organize all of your clips into categories and keyword collections and other things we're going to see in a second. But it can also be a wasted amount of space on your screen if you don't need to see this area. So at the top left corner, you do have this little tab here, and you can click on this to hide the library sidebar. You can also use the shortcut Command and the grave accent, which is the one above the tab key. So Command grave accent shows or hides that library sidebar. But in this case, I'm going to keep that hidden. So on the right side, we now see the library. And on my case, I'm on an iMac, and you can see how small this library's area is. But we're actually going to use this to start organizing our content. We're not editing a project yet, we're just organizing the content. So I really don't need this whole area at the bottom for the project. And I don't really need to inspect anything either. So at the top right corner of Final Cut Pro 10, you're going to click on these two buttons to hide the timeline and the inspector. And again, if I hover over these, we can see in the tooltip, Control Command 2 is the shortcut to hide the timeline. And on the right side to hide or show the inspector is Command 4. So you can use those shortcuts to hide those two areas. So already we're seeing a much larger area dedicated on the left side here to our browser. And this can make it a lot easier to navigate your content, especially if you're on a MacBook Pro or a smaller screen. Take advantage of your real estate by customizing Final Cut's interface. The other thing I'll usually do is drag this dividing line between the viewer, which is on the right side, and the browser. So I just drag this over to the right side because I don't need a really large viewer in this case. I just need a little preview over there. I'm more concerned about all the content I'm seeing on the left side of the browser. With the interface set up in a way I like it, you can actually save this as a custom layout. Just go up to the window menu, go down to workspaces, and there's an option to save this workspace as. So we can click on Save Workspace As, and I can call it Organizing. And then I'll click on Save. What that allows me to do is now I can go up to Window, Workspaces, and I can go back to the default workspace, which is Command 0. And here we are back at the default. Or I can go back to Window, Workspaces, and select my new Organizing workspace. And it goes back to the save layout I had before. There are other workspaces, and for example, there's an organized workspace that's a nice layout, very similar to what I have, but I usually don't like to see the inspector and maybe the viewers a little bit larger. So that's where those custom workspaces can really help out. Now what you'll see is even though I switch between those, we still see our library's sidebar is enabled. So I'm going to use that Command grave accent to hide that. Just get rid of that for now. So with our Final Cut layout set, it's time to skim across some video. And we looked at skimming a little bit inside of the import window, but what skimming is just dragging across the clip. I'm not even clicking or doing anything else, and you'll notice in the browser, in the little thumbnail, I'm able to actually see a preview of this time lapse, and then on the right side in my viewer, I'm also seeing a preview of this content. So even though this little time lapse here is about 10 seconds long, it only takes me a fraction of time to skim across it and see what that content is. So we have right now 10 clips inside of this little grouping of this date, and I can skim across all these clips and get a great idea of what this content is before I'm actually even playing back any of this content. And this is huge. This is a very powerful feature. You don't want to just sit and watch every single clip you have in real time, because you can get an idea of what you have just by skimming across it. We also have some sound effects, and you can see as you skim across the sound effects, you'll hear that audio playing back as well. So we've seen skimming, and we know how to skim across a couple clips. I can scroll up or down on this list to see the various shots. And what if I actually want to play back the clips? A lot of times you're going to want to actually watch these things in real time. So after you've skimmed to a specific spot, if you want to watch the clip, just hit the space bar on your keyboard to play back that clip.
And camera sit. And action. Do you want to get out of there, Ralph? Just a few more minutes, stud.
And then when you're ready, just hit the space bar again to pause back your playback. And that's all you need to do to play back the contents of your video. And in this little short film, just to give you an idea of what this is about, it is a Halloween movie, and a little build up to it. And it deals with this character you see in the elevator, and he is going through some weird transitions. He's actually becoming a werewolf. And there's a little bit of blood that we're going to see throughout some of these clips. But for the most part, this is a very short film, and there's not too much content to it. There's only about 12 scenes, I believe, with this. But we can scroll through these and see those clips. And they're all kind of jumbled up right now. They're not in any specific order. So it's going to be kind of hard to understand what we're looking at based on the way that they're sorted. But I want you to start getting familiar with playing back clips in your project. So regardless of how your media is sorted, go through and start to play back some of that content, either by skimming across it or using the space bar to play back the video. To help speed up the way that you play back and review this content, you're going to want to get familiar with the way the keyboard shortcuts work, specifically the J, K, and L keys. J, K, and L editors are some of the most powerful because you are able to skim through playback media, review it at record pace. So as an example, let's go down to a clip that we have here. This is one in one of the opening scenes inside of the office. And you'll see they are over near, inside this gentleman's office. And he's kind of moving around, getting some files, looking up. They actually do this take a couple times. But skimming across it, I can get an idea of what the clip is, but it can be a little confusing. So we're actually going to use J, K, and L and the spacebar in this case. So we already know that if I hit the spacebar, it's going to play back the content. So I'm going to play it back.
Guys, can hear you. Thanks.
And then if I want to, I could hit the spacebar again to pause it, but the K key will also pause the footage. So when you press the letter K, you can press it as many times as you want, but it just pauses the playback wherever you're at. Then the two keys next to the K key are J and L. So if I hit the J key, it's actually going to start to rewind the footage. And I can hit the K key to pause. And then if I want to, I'll hit the space bar to play back in real time. If I want to fast forward, I can hit the L key to start fast forwarding. And then again, to pause, I'll hit the K key. So let's go back and review this footage. So I'm going to rewind it using J. And you'll see he's sitting down right now, but we're rewinding to when he was standing up. Puts the file back in. I'll hit the K key to pause. And now I'm going to hit the L key to play back going forward. And if I want to quickly navigate, I can do the same thing. I can hit J, only this time I'm going to hit J multiple times. Each time you press the J key, it starts rewinding faster and faster. Same thing, if I press the L key a couple times, it's going to start really quickly fast forwarding through this content. So if I want to see the next time he's standing up, right about the time they're going to do the take, I can use that L key to fast forward. And there I see where the take happened. I'll use J to rewind it, K to pause, And I'll just use the space bar to play back the footage. And I can see that take, he kind of more forcefully takes that file out and smashes it on the table. So let's see when the next one happens. I'm going to use the L key, and again, pressing it multiple times. I'm going to fast forward. Wait till he gets back up. Right about there. I'll hit the K key to pause, and then hit the space bar to play back in real time.
All right, Simon. No worries, Simon.
And I'll hit the space bar to pause it. So that's using the J, K, and L keys, along with the space bar, to navigate your clips. You'll want to get very familiar with those keys because that allows you to play back here in the browser. But later on when we're editing a project, you can also navigate projects using those keys. With all of that said, we also want to look up at our clip appearance and filtering menu, which is this little film strip icon at the top here. We saw this in the import window also, and it's very similar here in the browser. But this allows you to change the size of your film strips that you're seeing. We're in the film strip view right now. So this is modifying it. If I change this one all the way to the left, I'm going to do very drastic changes so you can see what's happening. It shrinks all of these film strips of all the clips down to be very small. For me personally, I don't find them when this clip height is this small to be very useful. So I usually try to find a balance in between the smallest size, and if I go all the way up to the right, the largest size here. This can be too large where you're not taking advantage of your screen space. So mess with this, you can find a balance in between for the number of clips that you want to see. For this video, I'm going to keep it about in the center there. So that's the first one, is changing the clip height, which is how tall each one of these little film strips is. The taller the film strip, the less amount of the clips you'll see on the screen at one time, but you'll be able to see all those little images much, much larger. So that's the top one. The right, or the bottom one here, is to change the amount of duration for each one of the little pictures we're seeing within inside of a clip. So this can be very confusing, and I do find most people that are new to Final Cut do find this area confusing, and it is. You just have to take a little bit of time to get used to it. But with each one of these clips, they have a duration to them as well. So you may have noticed that they're divided with some empty space in between each of the clips. But you'll notice down here, if we look at keypad 1, it's just one block, one little square here, or one frame. But if I go over to keypad 2, there's actually 2 blocks for that one clip. And if I click on it, just doing a single click on the clip, you'll notice it selects or highlights that entire clip. Same thing if I click on this one, the yellow outline represents what's selected. So with each of these clips, they are different durations. And looking at the bottom of the browser here, I can see one of 517 clips is selected for a duration of 15 seconds and 23 frames. If I click on the next one, you'll notice one clip is selected, but the total duration is 1 minute, 29 seconds, and 6 frames. So the duration is going to be what determines how many of these little frames are displayed. So if we go down here, this Keys Day 2 clip is much, much longer. And if I click on it, you'll see it's 2 minutes, 48 seconds, and 2 frames. So it's a much longer clip. But what determines the amount of these little film strips, these little pictures? What actually determines how many of those are showing up? The actual determination is based on your clip appearance and filtering menu. And that's what this second slider is. So notice right now it is set to 30 seconds. That's what this number on the right is. Which means that each one of these blocks is going to represent at most about 30 seconds. Which makes sense, right? Our first clip here, the keypad 1 clip, was only 15 seconds long. So it's only going to be one clip. But our second clip here is 1 minute and 29 seconds. So it's not a minute 30, it's less than that, and it's only represented by 2 frames. But if I go up here and change this filtering menu, I'm going to drag it to the right so that it's set to a lower number. Here we're at 10 seconds. I'll even go down to 5 seconds. Going down to 5 seconds, notice here our keypad 1 is represented by 1, 2, 3 film strips because it's about a 15-second clip. So we have 3 5-second little pictures. Keypad 2, much longer, to minute 30, so there's a lot more of these little tiny pictures. So this can be very helpful if you want to see the contents of a clip without having to see the entire thing and guess what it is. For example, if I go back up here and drag it to the left, I can go all the way to all, which means no matter how long the clip is, it's only going to be represented by one of these little film strips icons. And I've set the viewer up pretty well to be able to still skim through these even though they're nice and small, but you have no idea how long each of these takes are. It can be much more of a pain to actually navigate between each of those clips. So definitely don't hesitate to go up here to this filtering menu and adjust the size of things so that you can better navigate your clips. Now we saw each of these clips are grouped with a date. In this case, we have September 10th, 2018 at the top here. There's 349 clips. I can actually hit the little triangle next to this to close that group. If we go all the way up here, we'll close September 12th, September 11th, September 9th. We can close each one of these little groups here and be able to essentially close them out so we're not seeing everything. If you hold Option and Shift, Option Shift lets you close them all at the same time. So here's all our dates. We can see the number of clips in each of these dates, but what do the dates actually represent? Well, that's what's up here in the filtering menu. Right now it's grouping the clips based on when they were created. So you have a couple different ways of grouping your clips. You can also group them based on when they were imported. We can go down and group them based on the reel name, scene name, duration, bunch of other metadata that's attached to these clips. And that can be very helpful depending on how you want to organize them. If you select something that has no data, basically there's no camera names attached to any of these clips, so it's not going to be very helpful. But in this case, I'm going to just change it back to content created. And it also has it how it's sorted, also based on the content created. You could sort it different ways if you wanted to as well. But I like how these are grouped right now into these dates. Kind of breaks it up a little bit. And then below that, we have the waveforms. So again, if I open up one of these and I enable the waveforms, we saw this in the import window. This will show the waveform for the audio being displayed just like it does here with the sound effects. You can see here on this clip, we see the audio waveform, which are these little lines at the bottom of the clip. So we also have an option here for continuous playback. What this means is if you play back a clip, with that disabled, it's just going to stop playback at the end of that clip. So let me play this back right here. Notice it just stops right at the end of that clip. If I wanted it to keep playing through each of the clips with continuous playback enabled, you notice it just keeps skipping from one clip to the next, to the next. And that can be very helpful, especially if you're using JK and L to navigate between clips. You don't have to pause and go to the next clip and make those changes. So if you like that, keep it enabled. If not, disable it with that checkbox. All right, then the final thing we're going to look at in this video is the list view. So you can use Option Command 2 on the keyboard. Option Command 2 to switch between the film strip view, which is what we were reviewing before, and the list view. Or you can click on this little icon at the top. This switches between those two views. And just like the import window, this list view just allows you to see much more data with each of the clips. So you see on the left side, we have the clip name. If I click on a clip, you'll see the little thumbnails at the top representing that clip. Regardless of how long that clip is, we see it up at the top here. You can click on any one of these columns to sort it. So if you're trying to look for the longest clip, for example, I'll click on duration. Right now it has the shortest clip at the top. I'll click it again, and now we see the longest clips up at the top. They're still grouped right now based on those date imported. So just like the other view, you could go up here and instead of content created, I click on none, and then they're not grouped. It's just every single clip is listed. And this allows me then to do duration. I can see the shortest or the longest clips of everything, which The completed cut that was included with edit stock is showing up here. Makes sense. It's about 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes. So that, of course, shows up at the top there. And then we have our staple remover. This is a really long clip. They just kept on making changes, adjustments to it, but we're able to see that there. So that's the list view. The other thing you can do with the list view, just like we saw in the import, you can control click or right click if you have a mouse there on the columns here. And you can choose which columns you want to enable or disable. So again, if I wanted the video frame rate to show up, I can click on frame rate. And now we see a list of the frame rates. Some of them are 24. We see some 25s. I can sort based on that frame rate. And I'll see all of those listed here. Most of this film was shot at 24 frames per second. So that makes sense that almost every clip is 24 frames per second, or frame rate. So that's the options here with the list view. I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but this is a way for you to sort and find content. You'll see periodically through the editing and through these tutorials, I'll switch between those to find a clip. I really like the film strip view. It just visually gives you a lot of feedback on what you're looking for and the clips that you're trying to navigate. But it is very common that you'll want to find something based on data, and that's where we'll use the list view. So you'll see me switch in between those two, either using this button or I can use the shortcut Option Command 2. Well, now that we know a little bit more about navigating, and I recommend practicing this, take a few minutes to go through and just navigate clips, play back, use J, K, and L, get familiar with navigating your clips. But in the next video, we're going to look at how to start marking these clips so that you can actually find the content that you want to use inside of your project that you're going to be editing a little bit later.